previously, I think I've read that you said that understanding Axis allows you to understand Jeff Mills. And you've also said, to quote, theories and subjects of substance fuel the minds within the axis. When and why did you decide on that conceptual composite, let's say, for your music?
Yeah, it was shortly after I left Underground Resistance, and I was thinking about the idea of starting a record label. I was in New York during a residency at the Limelight, and I wanted to take the time to think about how I would structure the company or the label to last. Or
and what year was this?
This was 1992, and the end of '92, winter of '92, going into '93, and I thought that maybe it's a wise time before I introduce the label, begin to start releasing material, that I should kind of narrow in on a certain direction in which it would kind of ride with time. The ideas of the label, the label structure would actually ride on time. So as I got older, I would not feel like maybe I was too old to compose electronic music for people. Mm. So I thought that the label itself should have basically the same mentality, the same character, the same form as myself, meaning it should focus on ideas that I think are interesting, or maybe someone might find interesting. Kind of like having a conversation, and it's like, hey, I heard this really interesting thing on the news today, or I read this interesting thing in the paper, but through music on CD or on vinyl, that type of situation. So I laid out like a structure of how the label should actually look. I tend to like darker colors. Mm-hmm. At the time I was really into very rich colors like gold and very very pure colors like black and white. So I chose those three colors as the basis, and I knew that it would be. I had a desire to make more than one particular style of music. So rather than trying to put all these different styles on one particular label, I knew that eventually I would create other sections of the label, which led me to the design of the logo and then the name, actually. So I knew that it would be multiple things revolving around one particular point. And I looked that up, and it came up. I seen Axis, and then from there I created the logo. And so the logo was actually created before I even created the labels. So I'm actually making my way around the logo. So there are three labels now: Axis, Purpose Maker, and Tomorrow. And I haven't approached the fourth and last label yet.
It seems that sometimes a personality is given, or maybe even demands, a kind of demigod status or a pedestal position. What I was wondering is what you find wrong about that pedestal position for a DJ.
Well, I mean, it's really easy for me to discuss because I come from an era where the DJ wasn't looked at in that position. I mean, I come from an era when a DJ was the guy in a booth, kind of tucked away in the corner. Though the people acknowledged him because he was the one controlling the music on the night, but the party was in another direction. It was amongst the people themselves. They used to face each other on the dance floor. It wasn't about what the DJ was playing. You would only be surrounded by other DJs interested in knowing what the song was, and then they would go back to to the party. You would really have very little contact throughout the night. So it's easy for me to see how that evolved and how the DJ is perceived today. And what I think is wrong is that I think, well, I don't think anything is really wrong, but I think that a lot of this persona of what a DJ is supposed to have today is actually, I don't think we as DJs really asked for that. It was something that was kind of created in the media to kind of excite the readers and to kind of create a situation where you have a person that kind of acts as a leader of a certain type of genre or subculture. So they created like this situation where these DJs are actually the ones that are kind of leading the people. And it was I mean, DJing here in America, growing up, there were DJs that we looked up to because they were known for being great DJs technically and theory-wise. People like Larry Levan and Ron Hardy, and I mean, these were DJs that were actually laying foundation for a whole dance culture. But when I went to Europe, I discovered that they have a different structure. And the first thing that I noticed in Europe was that each country has a shelf structure of DJs. There was a number one DJ in every country, and then number one, number two, and number three DJ. And I couldn't quite understand how they could determine who was the number one, because me being a DJ myself, every night can be different. You can have a good night, you can have a bad night. I wasn't quite sure how they were actually accounting for this type of structure, and it was something much different from what we had here, And later, then I kind of found out that they really needed to actually have this. So it was the number one DJ in Germany and the number one DJ in Paris, Laurent Garnier, and the number one DJ in the UK, Paul Oakenfold, and so on and so on. And I thought this is completely ridiculous. I mean. So I found out that they really needed to have this structure to kind of, they somewhat needed a leader, actually. They needed a person to be a representative of a certain territorial culture, someone that is the mouthpiece or at least the model of what they were doing, So I still don't believe it's really necessary, but it still exists in Europe and outside of America. We do it a little bit differently here. So.
Now, I guess related to that, obviously, like the live performance of techno is crucial to its understanding. I think that the development of that live performance and has kind of led to maybe a pattern or an infrastructure that's probably developed in the last 15 years or what have you. At this point, given that there can be sort of a really repetitive structure to what goes on, how live performance is presented to an audience, is there something you find that you think might be limiting about that structure, or that needs to be reevaluated?
Well, I mean, what has been created is it's I suppose it's the easiest structure. I suppose. I mean, the basic structure is to hire. Well, I can break it down for you, and the basic structure is to hire a international DJ or a DJ from another country to play with local DJs, and maybe a live act, which is actually someone bringing in equipment to perform for a crowd. The setting is typically a very bare room with maybe visual images, video, or some type of stationary hanging type of visual. If you're lucky, maybe dancers or some type of fire show, and that's it. That's the structure. That's the basic structure, and it doesn't go very far out of that structure. On average, I do about 100, 180, 190 parties a year, and that is the basic structure of what we have. Could we go out of that structure or maybe develop it much more? Yes, I think so. And I think in time, as electronic music artists and multimedia artists, they merge more and exchange ideas. I think then we'll begin to see very different settings, I think. I thought that maybe for a long time it would have to do with technology, but I think it's actually more so the merging of art forms, I think, that actually will make something different from what we have now.
And real briefly, you'd also earlier been speaking with the Burden Brothers about how this structure seems to, that you were finding it limiting even just as far as what kind of performance the actual DJs could give a crowd at that point, or within such a lineup.
Yeah, I think that I mean it's really only been a good, a little over 10 years, of the whole idea of the traveling DJ or the traveling electronic music artist. It's only been about a little over a decade, and half of that decade was basically spent in the studio developing what techno, the techno that we have today, discovering minimalism and discovering trance music and drum and bass and trip hop and all types of different derivatives and things like that. So we're actually kind of at the beginning of discovering what is possible, what is really needed, what is not needed. A lot of us are becoming of age where we're not looked at as young kids anymore, that we actually have things in common with people that are curators of museums and galleries and things like that, and who are production managers and producers of TV shows and things like that. So it, I mean, that was actually a big problem in the early 90s. I think the generation gaps were actually too wide. So we were looked down upon as, these rebellious young kids who were, dancing in the streets, and they're much different from an older generation. But now it's beginning to close in. So more opportunities actually coming for this genre of music. And I think that in time, somewhere in the near future, I would think that we should begin to see electronic music artists trying to exert more of their character through art, or at least trying to show more what techno sounds like, actually. And I think it's just a matter of time. I think that we've basically mastered the fundamentals of electronic music and how to produce it, and it really advances just slightly ahead of what we're given in terms of technology. But in terms of theory, what one is supposed to do and what one is possible, I think that we should begin to see those things evolve much more.
A real development of that idea, of theories, in other words. You also, I think when one starts looking at your work in depth a bit, you can quickly recognize that there's a lot of theory or conceptual framework behind it. Is it at all frustrating for you to have your work looked at outside of that, whatever the conceptual framework might be for a project?
Well, I mean, I started, I mean, I've been conceptualizing with music for a very, very, very long time. Even before I'd ever came to Europe, it was my job to actually produce radio shows. When I was the Wizard here in Detroit, it was my job to produce a radio show every night, 6 days a week, twice a night, and each show had to be different. So I learned at a very early age to play with music and to kind of group it together in terms of a theme or some type of concept. And when I began to produce music, it just naturally carried over into that. So I had always begun, I always kind of looked at music as a vehicle to be able to explain some type of place or event or thing or a psychological state or whatever. And at times it's frustrating that I get indications from people that they would only prefer to have a particular style of music. And it's difficult for me to understand why someone would not want to have a variety or different options in terms of music. This is, maybe I don't know. Maybe it's how I grew up. Maybe it's growing up here in Detroit, where listening to the radio, you could listen to very good rock and roll, to very good gospel, to very good art, rhythm and blues, to whatever. And it's puzzling to me that someone would only want to hear a particular type of music all the time. I don't think I can do anything all the time, for long periods of time, I think. So it's kind of strange that someone comes up to me and they go, your latest works are okay. They're not really for the dance floor, but I don't really care for that. I much care for the more hard driving material, and I don't know. It's just kind of puzzling to me. So I try to make the music as diverse as I possibly can for those people that just are music lovers, not someone that just wants to dance all night. So, and it's always been that way. I mean, even through Underground Resistance to going back to Final Cut to, if you look at the material that I've made ever since the beginning, it was always diverse. So I just assume that someone that comes up to me that would say something like that probably just came in contact with the music that I make, or just came in contact with techno or electronic music, and they don't quite understand that it's not one particular sound or pace or BPM or drum machine or whatever, that it encompasses many different styles and forms. And that's what I encounter.